The Royal Scots in the Napoleonic Wars. The French Revolution in 1789 led to war in Europe, India, Africa, and the Americas until the defeat of Napoleon in 1815. Britain initially subsidized Allied armies on the continent and used sea power against French colonies, but engaged also on land. By Waterloo, the regiment had expanded to 4 battalions, serving on both sides of the Atlantic and in India, indicated in this slide below. In 1793, the 2nd Battalion deployed to Toulon to support the surviving Royalists against the Republicans, and then to Corsica and Elba. The diary of Colonel John Moore, subsequently General Moore of Corunna, complimented the Royals on their conduct in Corsica. By 1798, the 2nd Battalion was at the mouth of the Tagus in Portugal, and in 1799 joined an expeditionary force to Holland, where it earned the battle honour Egmont op Zoom. In 1800, they helped defeat Napoleon's Army of the East in Egypt after Nelson had destroyed the French fleet at the Battle of the Nile, winning the battle honour Egypt and the right to bear the Sphinx on the colours. By 1804, Napoleon was threatening to invade Britain. The 2 regular battalions were joined by the 3rd and the 4th. The 4th remained at home defence, supplying drafts for the others, while the 3rd was to pursue Napoleon in the Peninsula campaign and take part in his final defeat at Waterloo. The 1st Battalion, 1790 to 1812. Garrison routine in Jamaica interrupted by refugees fleeing San Domingo, now Haiti. The 1st Battalion was sent to counter the threat. By 1797, debilitating disease left only 169 to embark for respite at home, including at Leith, with an interlude in Ireland in 1798 suppressing the United Irishman revolt, timed to coincide with a planned French invasion of Ireland. 1801 saw return to the West Indies against the French and Swedish and Danish armed neutrality. From Barbados, the 1st Battalion went to Guyana and Suriname, where their good conduct was praised by the governor and the presentation of a tureen made by the master silversmith Paul Thor. The tureen is on display in the museum. The 2nd Battalion, 1803 to 1806. On arrival in Barbados, the battalion immediately deployed to St. Lucia to lead the assault on Morne Fortune, which was carried with fixed bayonets. Expedition Commander General Grinfield congratulated the troops on the gallant capture of the fortress and the surrender of the island, in particular the gallant behaviour of the 2nd Battalion of the Royals. The battle honour St. Lucia was awarded. During the voyage from the West Indies, one of the transports to Canada was intercepted by a US frigate, but the battalion nevertheless assembled in Quebec in early August 1812. Operations against the Americans were normally conducted by detachments of varying strength, as opposed to by the complete battalion. During 1813, US positions at Sackett's Harbour and Sodas Point on Lake Ontario and at Fort Niagara were attacked. At the latter, US weapons, ammunition and stores valued at $1 million were seized and the battle honour Niagara was awarded. In July 1814, the Royals suffered heavy casualties at Chippewa, close to the Niagara River, during which Captain John Wilson was wounded. A painting of Wilson avoiding death is in the museum, along with the US letter of parole guaranteeing safe passage as a prisoner of war. 3 weeks later, the Royals inflicted heavy casualties on the Americans at Lundy's Lane to the west of Niagara Falls, this being the final significant action before the battalion sailed home in early 1815. The War of 1812 is sometimes known to Americans as King George's War. Among the Canadian soldiers who took part were a number of volunteers from Newfoundland. In 1958, an alliance was formed between the Royal Scots and the Royal Newfoundland Regiment, which is celebrated to this day. Information and exhibits are in the Allied regiments in the museum. 1,000 strong and reinforced with drafts from the 3rd and 4th Battalions, the 2nd Battalion was ordered to India to strengthen the British presence there, following a revolt of native troops of the East India Company. Sergeant Butler recorded that the barracks were temporary, made entirely from the cocoa nut tree, and divided into 5 rooms, each accommodating 180 men. The battalion's role was to demonstrate presence and to enforce British authority. The duties were not demanding, but the climate frequently required them to be carried out in appalling conditions. By the end of 1807, over 100 men had been lost to dysentery. The battalion was ordered to Balajabad, where a parade stage recorded a further 241 sick. At Madras in 1809, the battalion joined a force of 10,000 against disaffected East India Company troops and marched to Secunderabad. The 350 miles took 3 months. Sergeant Butler recorded that we marched barefooted, it being impossible to procure shoes, travelling through so much sand and water. Nelson's victory at Trafalgar removed the threat of invasion at home. Had invasion materialised, Napoleon's troops would have been confronted by local militia. Militia coat and pack are in the museum collection. Napoleon attempted to bar British shipping from European ports. Portugal refused, and a French army was sent to enforce compliance. Britain sent an army to assist Portugal, including the 3rd Battalion of the Royals. The Spanish failed to halt the French advance across Spain, and Sir John Moore withdrew through Corunna following a rearguard action in which the 3rd Battalion played a prominent part, gaining the battle honour Corunna. During the course, Captain Waters captured French dispatches containing key intelligence. The 3rd Battalion spent 1809 campaigning at Walcheren. An account by Company Commander Thomas Sinclair is in the museum archive. Returning to Portugal and Spain from 1810 to 1813, the 3rd Battalion gained the battle honours Busaco, Salamanca, Vitoria, San Sebastian, Peninsula, and for the pursuit through France, Nieve. Of these battles, none is believed to have been harder fought than by the Light Company of the Royals in storming the Forlorn Hope breach in the walls of San Sebastian. An account by Lord Clyde, who led the Forlorn Hope, is in the museum archive. Napoleon's escape from Elba in February 1815 caused the Allies to take to the field once more in Belgium. Armies of Wellington and Blücher were at risk of being attacked in turn, so Wellington ordered Picton's 5th Division, including the 3rd Battalion, to Quatre Bras on the 16th of June. There, after a 20-mile march in the heat of summer, they took vital ground at Bayonet Point, and along with the 38th afoot, the Royals formed a square to repulse repeated counterattacks by French cavalry. Quatre Bras was a decisive prelude to Waterloo. The Battle of Waterloo, which was to alter the course of European history, commenced on the morning of 18th June after a miserably wet and stormy night. The 3rd Battalion of the Royals, still in Picton's 5th Division, took up station on the right of Wellington's army, but were not engaged until the afternoon. 3,000 strong, the division sustained repeated attacks by a French corps of 13,000, first repulsing infantry by skillful use of ground, musketry and bayonet charges, subsequently holding squares against 4,000 cavalry. In the course of the afternoon, General Picton was killed. Lieutenant Colonel Campbell, commanding officer of the 3rd Battalion, took command of the brigade, while Major MacDonald, who had previously fought in the Peninsula, including at San Sebastian, took command of the 3rd Battalion. Major MacDonald's medals are on display in the museum. With the colours at risk of capture at the height of the battle, Sergeant Major Quick was shot through the heart while carrying the King's colour. 1 lieutenant and 3 ensigns had already suffered the same fate. When Ensign Kennedy died carrying the colour, the sergeant attempted to take it from him, but could not disengage the officer's grip. The sergeant threw the ensign, still clutching the colour, over his shoulder and returned both to the ranks. The French, in recognition of that remarkable act of gallantry, withheld their fire. The action of Kennedy and the unknown sergeant typified the conduct of the Royals at Waterloo. The Kennedy family memorial in the old High Church in Inverness records that at the time of his death that day, Ensign Kennedy was only 1 week past his 15th birthday. In memory of the officers killed at Waterloo, the surviving officers fashioned their dead comrades' crossbelt buckles into a snuff box, which is on display in the museum. The colour in the diorama with Kennedy in the museum, being carried by a sergeant, is a replica, but the actual King's colour he had been carrying that day is on display also, along with the regimental colour. Other regiments' Waterloo colours exist, but may not have been in service as long as these. Detail being painted rather than embroidered is typical of older colours of the era. Although Waterloo was not until 1815, our Waterloo colours were issued to the 3rd Battalion when it formed up in Hamilton in 1804. It is remarkable that they survived campaigning at Corunna, Walcheren, throughout the Peninsula campaign, including at San Sebastian, and then during the pursuit through France to Quatre Bras and Waterloo. Once Napoleon had been defeated, all regiments were reduced to 2 battalions, and the 3rd Battalion colours were transferred to the 2nd Battalion in India, where they gained further battle honours of Mahidpur and Nagpur in the Maratha Wars, and finally at Alva during the First Burma War. Thus, their service spanned the period 1804 to 1826, rivalled by very few others. On return from Burma, the colours were laid up in St Giles Cathedral, the mother church of Scotland, in Edinburgh's Royal Mile, where they remained until 1934, when they reverted to the care of the regiment. The netting on these colours is not original, but a conservation method of the 1930s. In 2015, during the Waterloo bicentenary commemorations, both the King's and the regimental colours were displayed in the Great Hall of Edinburgh Castle for 3 months and were seen by more than 500,000 visitors. There being insufficient space in the museum to display both colours in their entirety, and rather than return them to storage where they would not be seen by the museum's 500,000 visitors each year, the trustees decided that they should be folded to feature the royal cipher of the King's colour and the Union flag detail of the regimental colour. A sizable number of prisoners were taken in the course of the conflict. Most were French, but others included Americans, many of whom were sailors. The road up through the castle to the Royal Scots Museum was built by French prisoners. Beyond the museum is the French prison, where many American prisoners were also held. The former Royal Scots depot at Glencorse, where our recruits were once trained, was built on the site of Greenlaw House, which was also used to house French prisoners. Although Greenlaw House no longer stands, the contemporary tower still stands at the centre of the modern Glencorse Barracks, which is occupied today by 2nd Battalion, the Royal Regiment of Scotland. Wellington's and Blucher's defeat of Napoleon at Waterloo changed the politics of Europe significantly and enduringly. The Royal Scots added Waterloo to the other battle honours of the war: Egmont-op-Zoom, Egypt, St. Lucia, Niagara, Corunna, Busaco, Vittoria, Salamanca, San Sebastian, Nive, and Peninsula. But it was at terrible cost. Between Quatre Bras and Waterloo, 8 officers and 35 soldiers had been killed, and 25 officers and 295 soldiers wounded. Survivors were awarded the British Army's first campaign medal, and soldiers were allowed to claim 2 additional years' service to their pension, and were known as Waterloo men. From the Waterloo Medal Roll, we know the names of all the 3rd Battalion officers and men who took to the field that day at Waterloo. One of their descendants is presently the chairman of the Royal Scots Association. Further information is available on the regimental website.